2, 3. Hello, everybody. Welcome to my channel, Perpetual-Time. My name is Alexandros Foti, and today we're with Marco Ferrante, who is a highly professional watch dealer and knows plenty about watches. So, Marco, tell me about yourself.
Alex, such a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. It's a pleasure to be here. As you mentioned, I'm a watch dealer by trade, but honestly, it's a funny journey, right? You start out in watches. I got into watches at the age of 16, almost 10 years ago now. I bought an Orient Explorer, and it was my first kind of mechanical wristwatch. Nothing crazy. It was maybe a couple $100. And at the time, I'd owned Citizen and Armani and that kind of stuff, but I wouldn't consider myself a watch collector at all. And as soon as I turned that watch over, I just fell in love with like the mechanics of it, right? The little inner workings. And ever since then, I've been pursuing my watch passion. And it led me down a crazy road. I never thought I'd be in the business physically. So for those who don't know about me, I have a Bachelor of Commerce, actually. So I have a major in finance and a minor in marketing. And, I was working in finance my whole way through university. And I met Nico Leonard online, and then like a whole crazy thing happened. And it led me down this path, which is just incredible.
Well, it just shows the strength of social media, doesn't it, Marco? If it's done in a correct way, in a professional way, it can really boost your career. Because I remember yourself being on the streams, and then you went from being on the streams to then I think working with Nico at one point, and then Roman Schaff, and now you're with Burdeens. Burdeens, is that how you pronounce it?
Correct. Yeah, Burdeens.
In Chicago, and we were just talking about the watch behind you is the IWC Big Pilots, isn't it? And it's, I still prefer I like that one, but I like the one with the green dial. Have you seen that one?
I have, yeah, I have. We're very lucky. We're an AD for over 20 brands, and one of them is we're actually a boutique for IWC, and that's what it is. Yes.
Do you know who that is? Sorry, sorry. He's an exceptional watchmaker, Mr. Tilston. I've known Stephen for many years, and he's Rolex accredited as well. So we have a Rolex accredited watchmaker who actually, he's exceptional at his job. But yeah, thanks for watching.
You got the what we call the swole genetics. The swole genics in America. Yeah, no. So I'm very lucky. I get to handle a lot of IWC here, just because, especially at the store I'm at, we're actually a boutique. And their watches are phenomenal, right? I think they're probably some of the most underrated, to the point where, even JLC shares their perpetual calendar movement with IWC, right? That kind of Kirk Claus based perpetual calendar movement. That's just, how good it is. So yeah, no, they make some phenomenal timepieces.
Now that you mention IWC, Marco, I'm just curious. They make a highly complication piece, don't they, that actually has the year. Yeah, it shows the year. And how many years? Because apparently, once it finishes, you can add the extra years. It comes in like a little tube.
Yeah. So if I'm not mistaken, perpetual calendars will run generally without fail for 100 years, right? Usually it's a century, and then you have to kind of reset it. You would probably know this better than myself. I think IWC changed that with the release of the Eternal calendar, right? So now I think it's good to run kind of continuously forever, so long as you keep it wound, is the idea, right? So so they have the digital display of the year on the actual watch, which is super innovative, and I think like also really, really cool just to see it there physically. And the way that they achieve it, to be honest, is beyond my grasp and comprehension, but it's pretty sick.
Well, the price point of that watch, for considering what it does, is exceptional, really.
Absolutely.
It's not. Okay, it's still expensive, but compared to other brands, it is exceptionally well priced.
Absolutely, and you know what? You could say that generally about IWC, especially, on the secondary market. We're talking, I think brand new, it'll be around the 40,000 price range. But you can get some, older variations of their perpetual calendar movements pre-owned for under $20,000 US. I'm talking, right? I know you guys operate in pounds. It's probably like what, 15 or 16,000 pounds. Which, where are you really? And the same goes for JLC. A lot of the time, you could find some of their perpetual calendars, similar or the same movement, generally speaking. And it's like, where are you finding that level of complication for that kind of price point? outside of maybe some more niche independents. And even at that, I don't know if they deliver that kind of quality.
So would you say that IWC is a good brand to get into if you're starting in watches?
Yeah, I mean, I just released a video today, and I listed my top 5 kind of entry level luxury watches, and one of them was the Mark 20, just because or Mark 18 also is a great watch. You know, it's just that classic kind of fleeker design. I think everybody has to experience at some point in their collection, if not have it in their rotation every single day, just because it's so versatile, so easy to wear, so legible, and yeah, super reliable, especially from IWC.
And I have to ask this, Marco, what's your opinion on the resale value of IWC? Because I have my opinion.
Yeah, of course. It's not great. Obviously, you know, the current retail for like a Mark 20, for example, I think is just a hair over 6,000 US, right? And you know, they're going to resell around the 45 to 5,000 US just because they're new. But you could get the Mark 20s in some cases around $3,000, you know, which is, you know, their retail was around 5,000, right? So it's a pretty dramatic decline. And yeah, I mean, it depends how you look at it, right? Is it because it's a bad watch? I don't think so. I think the quality is certainly there. Maybe the movement isn't like anything crazy, right? A lot of the time they're using, you know, modified off the shelf, as we call them, base movements, but overall they're I think well built.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mainly when I was doing my WASTEP course, Watches Switzerland Training Education Program, I managed to work with JLC and IWC in the service center, and it was remarkable. I mean, the level of detail they go to. I mean, they had backlogs of work. I mean, we're talking months. I mean, they had like at least 6, 7 watchmakers, and the head watchmaker was Leo Sweeney. And I managed to be, I think I did like 4 or 5 weeks of work experience. But I must say, though, at that time in the early 2000s, they were actually movement exchanging, which shocked me.
What do you mean? Oh, like exchanging when they were servicing?
Yeah. It's very common now.
Yeah, so I know Cartier does that, right? The Cartier will movement exchange their watches. I don't know about that many other brands that do it, but that's kind of surprising because the 1990s would have been when Gunter Blumlein was at the helm of IWC. So I guess the turn of the century, maybe things changed when he wasn't so prevalent. But yeah, that is kind of surprising. You know, we actually had an IWC watchmaker come to do. Sorry, I'm going to go on a little tangent, but it's all.
No, it's all right. You go ahead.
He actually came to here because we offer, you know, like for clients who want to do like kind of events where you're like taking apart a watch and then you put it back together kind of thing. And it was really cool. Like I respect watchmakers' work a lot more because the dexterity in your hands that it requires, you know, when you're like pulling it out and you're not really worried about scratching the bridges or anything like that, it's really easy, you know what I mean? But when you actually gotta be really careful and like not scratch anything and not break anything, and got to be super careful the way that you place it. It really makes you appreciate watchmakers a lot more and just how incredible their job is. But IWC is actually one of the few brands like Patek, like Vacheron, for example, that can go back in their archives and service anything because they have very extensive archives, you know, from the first watch that they made all the way to today. So that was a pretty interesting thing that I didn't know about also.
Well, unfortunately, Marco, Rolex don't do that.
Yeah, no, Rolex lost their archives a lot. I mean, they just never kept track, right?
No, and it's quite frustrating because, you know, I get individuals that ask me to service the watch, and I can only service that watch if I'm able to have the parts, you know. But then, I mean, there is specialists in London like Stephen Hale, who marked my exam papers. He's an exceptional watchmaker. He does. I think he actually had the contract with Rolex to work on their older stuff, so Rolex wouldn't work on it. I believe they don't work. Steve's watching. I believe Rolex won't work on anything over 20, 25 years old. There's some rule, and I think it may be referred to the likes of Stephen Hale. But parts, so we're going to talk about that. Parts are becoming more and more difficult to get hold of. I'm very fortunate enough at this moment in time to have access to original Rolex movement parts. Case parts is difficult, but movement parts. So if a watch comes in, Marco, and I have access to the movement parts, I'll take it on. But it's very frustrating when you get a brand, whether it's Rolex, Jaeger Cultura, IWC, you can't get the parts, and you have to explain that to the customer, and they feel as though you're trying to be difficult, because you can go and buy a part for your car,
right?
More or less.
It's not so easy in the watch world,
No, and I mean, even
a lot of red tape. Oh man.
Oh yeah, even the likes of Gucci are now doing it. Tag Heuer have just done it. Hublot have just done it. And now Gucci, you have to have an accreditation with Gucci. And I don't want to be disrespectful, but I believe that Gucci are actually making their own watches now in terms of in-house movements, or some. Yeah, everyone's going down this horology route. But I've got a question for you. If you could pick one watch, no, it doesn't matter about the price. What watch would you pick? What is your favorite watch? And I'll tell you mine for various reasons. You tell me your.
Yeah, I guess, are you asking me like favorite watch to wear every day, or like if I could only have one watch, or like grail watch? What are we talking? Sorry.
Oh, Marco, if you can only, I'm going to write down. You can only have one watch, no matter what the price is, and then a watch that you would suggest to own as a first watch.
It's a good question. For me personally, it's going to have to be my Rolex GMT Master 2. So I have a back row. I was very fortunate to get it under like super crazy circumstances. Some people are aware about it. It's kind of a long story. I won't get into it, but it's just a perfect watch to wear on an everyday. I know Rolex is kind of a cop-out answer, right? But it's just so comfortable on a bracelet with the GMT complication. Aesthetically, I think it's just a perfect watch. And it's just, I don't know. I love a Rolex GMT Master 2, but there's so many other brands that make phenomenal watches that we can obviously get into, but I don't know. There's just something that always, it's one of those watches I'll put down. I'm very fortunate. I have a pretty nice watch collection. I'm wearing a Vacheron Constantin Traditionnel with a blue dial. It's actually a limited edition of 15 pieces, and it's number 2, which is
15.
Yeah,
1.5.
Yeah. So, and it's number 2, which is pretty crazy. But every time I put watches down, I go back to my back roll. It's just like, oh, it's the best. I fall in love with it all over again.
Yeah, but wouldn't you say, Marco, that is because of the history and the emotion of the watch rather than what it is?
Yeah, 100%. I've made I mean, it's the longest tenure in my collection. I've owned it for 4 years. 4 years. And I've made so many memories with it, and the way that I got it, like everything about it it's awesome.
Well, I always say how you buy your watch is how you will be with it. So if you buy in spurious, like, you're not sure about the person you're buying from, the dealer you're buying from, or online shop or whatever, you tend to never wear that watch comfortably. You kind of like feel as though that, you're never 100% with it. That's why I always say to people, make sure that when you buy a watch that you've figured out that, first of all, you can afford it. Second of all, you know who you're buying from. And thirdly, just go and just take action and buy the damn thing, instead of talking about it. That's.
And I'm sure you see this a lot, right, yourself. I don't know if you sell watches, at all, but you see this all the time, and it happens. Like, people are very undecisive. They don't know which direction to go in. And I tell people this all the time. Listen, to a certain extent, that's why I'm here, right? I'm not one to push you in a certain direction. What I like to do is actually give people the facts. Like, here are the merits of ownership. Here's why maybe you should consider something else. Here are some alternative examples that I currently have that I don't have that you should consider. And that's the way I go about it, right? Just because I feel like people have to make their own decisions, especially when collecting watches. Although I'm in the sales business, right, and my primary objective is to sell a watch, if I do it in a transactional manner, I lose the customer, over time, right? They will never trust me because they'll have a very bad watch purchase. They're going to trade out of it, all that kind of stuff. They won't attach the sentiment of, oh, this watch is very special and meaningful and I can't wait to make great memories. It's just transactional. But if I actually help them come to a reasonable decision and essentially allow them to find their forever watch, or a watch that they're going to hold for a very long time, or maybe they'll own it 6 months and flip it, but they'll really enjoy the 6 months that they wear it, then at that point it's a totally, it's a totally different experience. So yeah, I see it all day long, and that's really what I strive for, right? It just doesn't make sense to try to push people in one direction if they're not really sure where they're at.
Yeah, it's really uncomfortable when you have a pushy salesperson, because I was actually in a well-known store in the Trafford Centre in Trafford in Manchester, and they have Bulgari. Now, I always talk about the Bulgari Octofinissimo because it's for me, it's a beautiful watch. It's just very elegant, stunning, and the movement on it is very, very thin. To work on that movement, if you just put a bit of force on that movement, you could actually bend. It's really, really thin.
Right.
And I was trying it on, and the sales guy was like, "Are you going to take it?" That's what he said to me. He just said to me, "Are you buying it now?" I looked at him and thought, "No." I thought I could.
Now I'm not taking it. Yeah.
No, it's just, and unfortunately, there's a lot of dealers that are like that because they become numb to the whole experience. They don't understand and appreciate that there's somebody that's saved up their money, or they're buying it for their son's graduation or daughter's graduation or whoever. And that moment cements in their mind that it has to be perfect, and then the watch has to be perfect. And I actually went into a place called Boodle and Dunthorne a couple of days ago to pick up a Patek Philippe strap, because they are authorized Patek Philippe. And even though it's just a strap, the experience they give you is number one. They really speak to you politely. They bring you a nice, coffee or espresso, or they show you around, and you can't beat it. I mean, my father, even though I deal in watches as well, I told my father, "Listen, you've just sold your house. Let's go to a Rolex AD." And he got the solid gold bluesy, the ceramic one, blue bezel, blue dial.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was a great experience, but they wouldn't let him have two watches. He wanted the blues in the zombie, and they said no. They wouldn't sell them to him. So he could only have one. Yeah. He could only have one. And then his card got declined, right? And he was so embarrassed. So he just sold his house, so he had the money, trust me.
Right. Yeah.
His card got declined, so I had to buy it for him. But yeah, no, it was important that he got that experience. And I could have, like I said, I could have sold him a watch, or I could have referred him to somebody else. But there is, like, the boutiques, authorized boutiques, they are
100%.
top.
And that you hit the nail on the head, no doubt about it. I think the experience when purchasing a watch is maybe just as important as the watch itself, right? Because that's the first point of contact, right? And it kind of cements a good or a bad memory with the watch immediately. And I think that's what a lot of brands get very well. And it's something that I learned because, for the most part, when I was working for Luxury Bazaar in Pennsylvania, you're in the middle of the suburbs of Pennsylvania. I would see maybe one person a month, if that, And now being in Chicago is a huge market. I'm downtown. I mean, we probably get 50 to 100 people coming into our store sometimes a day, right? So it's like, it's a totally different experience. When you're dealing with something like that, it's a totally, totally different experience. So you have to strive to make every person's experience really, really top, high class, because if you end up being like that person at Bulgari, it's just going to turn people off immediately, no doubt about it. And I think that's what some brands, not all, there's obviously some bad apples, but I think some great Rolex ADs, especially I think Patek Philippe does a good job. Obviously, again, there's totally bad apples, but I think there's a lot of great actors, and certainly a lot of boutique experiences that are awesome to have.
But Marco, it must be frustrating when you have a client that walks in that is just completely wasting your time, and that they are, but you're just being polite. Because
and you know what? So the way I see it is like this, Alex. Sometimes we'll get somebody in the boutique. He's 20 years old, and he says, "My Grail watch is a Tudor Black Bay 58." And like, to a salesperson, it's almost like you're signing your death warrant, because it's like, you're probably not going to sell him anything today, or like, anything down the line. But the way that I see it is like this: if I'm going to not give him the time of day or the respect, then I shouldn't be in the business. I will actually, I'll tell you an interesting story. I give everybody the time of day. and my biggest sale ever, I sold a Rolex Daytona and a Patek Philippe Aquanaut in rose gold. And when I sold that, it was to a customer who would swipe up on my story and ask me the price of like almost every single day of watches I posted on Instagram. And he would do this for 6 months, right? Kind of the same idea, right? Like a customer coming into, the what's it called, the store, and not ready really to buy anything. You just know you're kind of wasting your time. But I answered him every single time for 6 months straight, okay? And I swear to you, I sold him in one sale 540,000. He said, Marco, you're the only person I've ever seen answer my texts every single time. So I want to do business with you. Now, of course, that's a one-off, it's a crazy experience. But I just feel you have to give everybody the time of day, because you also never know what their background is, right? And if they can't help you maybe with the sale today, what's really important in our business sometimes is referrals, right? We get referred people who will sell us a watch or who will buy a watch from us. But also, we were talking about this in the background, potentially sell us a watch. I always say it's actually not so difficult to sell a watch anymore. And I know that sounds a little bit crazy, right? These are high value items, but there's so many outlets, right? Be it, and customer Facebook groups, Chrono24 and eBay, you can market it on social media like this. There's so many avenues to technically sell a watch. The hard part is curating a nice select, especially for a store like us. We have, at any given time, almost 300 pre-owned watches in stock. It's actually curating that and making it enticing for customers to buy from us, right? But actually, the physical process of buying inventory is really, really difficult. So for me, it's really important that I always give, no matter who it is, somebody the time of day. Whether it's a $4,000 watch they're going to buy maybe 5 years from now, and it's a big maybe. I never know if they'll come back again, or it's $100,000+ watch.
Well, listen, I'll be honest with you. I have to confess, I've made mistakes where I've not gave the time of day to certain individuals because I just felt as though asking too many questions and not taking action. And
hey, I feel your pain, brother. Being in the business, I feel your pain. Absolutely. It happens all the time. It does.
I don't know if before I mention this story, but Stephen Tilston, the watchmaker, actually I class him as a master watchmaker. Rolex now send their watches, vintage watches, to Geneva, and not only that, as Steve knows, they charge an estimate. They will charge you for the estimate. You can't, it's not like deducted from the watch or anything. They charge for the estimate. And I believe that they do that is because a lot of individuals are buying like sports Rolexes, like vintage sports Daytonas, Submariners, this and that, and asking for an estimate and not proceeding. And then they'll use that as paperwork to prove that the watch isn't stolen and it is correct.
You got it. You hit the nail on the head.
Yeah. The other one is where some individuals will walk into Rolex and ask to place a link in a watch. It's the cheapest way of that watch being seen by Rolex. They only will fit the link in if they check the watch on the lost and stolen. They will not fit a link in.
Right.
So, yeah. And we just let out secrets.
It's funny you say that because actually it's becoming custom for most brands. So we're in AD for about 20 brands. And I believe now Omega charges for an estimate, or at least at our boutique, we have to charge for an estimate, just kind of sending it out the whole line. Because a lot of the time, what you end up with is like, 30, 40, 50 service requests from the brand, from one boutique, let's just say, and they end up turning it down. It is in fairness to the brands, a lot of wasted time in that regard. So like, I understand where they're coming from. I do understand it, although it does suck. I can't lie.
So we'll just look at what people are saying in the chats. Great to see Mark and Ice talking watches. Thank you, Dodger. Steve shows us praying for those monarchs. Happy Friday, everyone. Alex, you're always a gentleman. Thank you, Stephen. De-Buffoon. What do you think of De-Buffoon? I can't really say properly. What do you think of?
Yeah, I've been fortunate. I've handled a lot of their watches, and I think the quality is there, right? It's certainly not an easy seller, especially in today's market. But I think the quality is really exceptional. I'm not a big fan of the DB. I think I always confuse these. I think it's the DB25, the one with the spring-loaded lugs. just because it's such a pain to actually wind that crown. So it's a bullhead crown, and the way that you wind it is you have to pull down on the actual, what's it called, lugs, and then wind the crown with the bullhead crown, right? So that's actually not that easy to do. So I much prefer, I think it's the DB28s that are that model, and then the DB25s are the kind of traditional round case watches with the crown at 3 o'clock, and those are really nice. Those I really like, but the quality's there. It's pretty expensive. It's really expensive, actually.
You just reminded me of something when you said how fiddly it is and how annoying it is. I don't suppose you ever saw that JLC that was a collaboration with Aston Martin?
They did a lot of them. So I know they did like chronographs, tourbillons. Is there one in particular? I'm not sure.
Yeah, where it had no pusher. It was a chronograph. It was a chronograph.
Oh, yes, on the crystal. It was on the crystal, right?
A load of rubbish. I could not understand that. Why?
It was on the crystal.
Talk about making things difficult. It was just pointless.
Yeah. And it's not like, is that historic, like based on some historic watch or something? I don't even think so, right? I think they just kind of did it because they could.
I don't know, but I just could not grasp why you'd want that watch.
Yeah.
I always say, tell me if I'm wrong, but whenever a watch brand and a car brand get together, it's like the kiss of death. Because if you remember Gerard Perregaux and Ferrari, you couldn't get rid of those things.
I remember I saw a Gerard Perregaux. It was a triple bridge tourbillon with a perpetual calendar chronograph. I think the retail was something astronomical, like 550,000. And I think we bought the watch for 50 grand. It was 10 cents on the dollar.
Wow.
Yeah. It's unbelievable. Yeah, no, it's a huge kiss of death. I mean, even the RM Ferrari collaboration. So I saw one posted wholesale for 50% off the retail. I think the retail is 2.1 million, and it was like just over $1 million was what it was posted for. And you know what? It's probably very negotiable because I don't know many people paying $1 million for that watch, to be honest with you.
What do you think of Richard Mille watches?
You know, I think Richard Mille gets a lot of hate. Some of it warranted, some of it unwarranted. I think some of the stuff that they make is some of the most and I'm talking about like early on, right? Like if we go to the like early like 2000s to 2010s, they were making some of the most innovative watches, right? I don't think people can deny the innovation of like a Nadal, a Bubba Watson, like that kind of G-force mechanism, which is now actually kind of being done by IWC and other brands. And even things like, you know, split-second tourbillons and function selectors. A lot of the movements were coming out of what's known as APRP. So originally it was Renault and Papi, but now bought by Audemars Piguet. But listen, they also make a lot of overpriced stuff, you know. And I made a video about this that got like almost 50,000 views. And it's just me being honest. On RM11 and RM1103, which is kind of their gold standard, it's probably their most collectible chronograph. And even the RM6501 uses this. It's a Parmigiani-based movement. So, I mean, you're paying essentially on the secondary market for an RM11, you know, titanium is probably going to be about 150,000 and gold 180,000. And the 1103s are even more expensive for essentially what's a Parmigiani and a Richard Mille case, you know, Parmigiani movement and Richard Mille case. Listen, if that's worth it to you, that's your prerogative, you know. But I mean, you start to walk through like the cost of it, like a 6501 NTPT, right, which is a watch that retails for what's it called? I think it retails for 450,000, right? Just to give you an example, I actually did this with somebody the other day. So this is a carbon case watch. For those who don't know, RM makes their own carbon cases. They have a factory. So what does it cost them? Let's call it on the top end $10,000. You know, let's say that the labor to put the movement together, another $10,000. Again, just being very, very generous with the numbers here. And then the movement itself, a split-second movement. Okay, they have to make modifications to it, this, that, the third. Okay, we're talking about, let's call the cost $30,000. It's probably significantly less, but let's just be super generous. They're all in cost to make the watches 50 grand. And they're selling it for 450,000. You know, it's an eight times markup. It's pretty unbelievable, but they're able to do it somehow, and they're very successful at it.
Yeah, but Marco, we can go down the rabbit hole of every brand.
Yeah, every brand, absolutely, every brand.
Yeah. Handbags or
Sure.
clothes. And I will say this, and I've mentioned this before. I'm not going to say which luxury brand, But I was sold a watch. Guess what the percentage was off the watch on their current models, just for people that work there.
So
Just for
modern productioners. So on some brands, I will discount as much as 30%. So we'll get a watch, essentially 40 back from the AD, and on some brands, I'll discount them up to 30%.
But what I mean is that I had a friend of mine that worked for the company.
Okay.
And he had a list of watches. It wasn't a big list.
What it cost them?
No, what they were willing to sell to the employees.
Oh, 60 off, 60% back from the MSRP.
80.
80%. Oh my goodness.
And there was even solid gold pieces. This was before the gold went up.
Oh my
yeah,
goodness.
80%. So that just tells you how much money they make. They're still making money. 80%.
Holy crap. I didn't expect that. I thought like 60, 60, maybe they're making 70 off. They're making 10. Oh, wow, that's incredible.
80%, yeah.
Man.
It's off-putting, isn't it? But all companies, look, the way I look at it is, right, once they have the marketing is the most expensive thing. But once they have the manufacturing and the contract, blah, 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 then it takes some years, but then they're on profit. They're on profit, and it is ridiculous profit. Big profit.
Yeah, that's unbelievable.
Now, I don't know how true it is, but apparently a Rolex dial, the costings to produce is like $15-20 US. Because it's how can it look?
Of scale. Yeah, they have the manufacturer. People say this, or I say this, and people get upset. But Rolex is made on an assembly line, not for anything, right? Like the bracelets are for the most part done by machine, and they're incredible watches, right? But it is even down to the movement, other than the fine tuning, to make it really precise. There's very, very few things that are not just done on essentially an assembly line. So they're operating at huge economies of scale. They kind of perfected making their watches, right?
Look, I mean, they don't work with people. They just buy them out. So if one company's making dials or whatever, bang, they'll just buy them out. I think they make almost, I don't believe they make their own boxes. I don't know how true that is. Stephen will tell us. Sorry, when I was talking about the that particular brand of watch, I'm not going to say which brand it is, but yeah, he knows who sold it to me. So yeah, what was I saying? Yeah, so if you were to, I personally think a stainless steel Rolex Submariner ceramic. I wonder what do you think it costs to make that watch? Just before marketing,
Rolex's cost.
Yeah, just the cost before marketing, everything.
$2,000 at the absolute most.
How much?
$2,000.
Oh, listen, it's a lot less than that, Marco. It's in the hundreds, in my opinion. It has to be. It has to be in the hundreds.
No, it can't be.
No, but why is that so hard to believe?
Because the labor is the most expensive part. It's not the materials. It's not the materials. It's the labor, I would assume, involved in it. No.
Yeah, but they're churning them out though.
It's true.
And they're holding them back.
$1.25 million watches a year now. Yeah.
Oh, so they obviously, it doesn't cost much to make once you have that process. It's the marketing that kills them.
You're probably not wrong, honestly. It's probably costing them at most $1,500 to $2,000. And that's like for a gold watch. That's probably for a gold, and just because of the cost. Because how much gold is realistically in a roll? It's not all that much gold.
No, it's not. No. Don't forget the days they had hollowed out cases. The first ones wasn't a solid case. It was hollowed out. So was the bracelet. But now as far as I know, they're solid. I believe they're fully solid. But is that because of weight, or is that because I don't know? But I remember many years ago, what was happening was the individuals were buying a real Rolex Day and taking the movement out and putting a fake movement in. and then they would use, they will then get a fake case and bracelet and put the real movement in that. And so they make 2 watches out of one. And they'll sell it on, yeah. And the other thing about day dates is, as you most probably know yourself, is that the bracelets, well, majority of them are Italian bracelets.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't
They're
know
not,
that.
yeah, AM bracelets, aftermarket bracelets. A lot of them are made in Italy. And if you look at this, and if they haven't changed the clasp on it, if you remember, there's like I think it's a Saint Bernard on stamping, and there's like
There's,
there's a
I
lady.
forget what they are, but there's specific codes as well that you want to look for, depending on the age of the watch. That's kind of how you tell if it's authentic. I forget what it is. Honestly, for the most part, since working at Burdeens, I get kind of lazy because we have 3 watchmakers on staff, Alex. So they just take care of it for me, you know. So like, I don't have to worry about this anymore. But yeah, no, it's there's a lot. You have to be very careful in the vintage world. Very careful.
Oh God, listen, I've been stung in the vintage world. You know, it's a vintage world is a minefield.
Yeah.
I don't know who you go to for your vintage. I mean, I don't know who in America is known for.
Yeah, you know what? It's so I will only take in a vintage watch if I know it's coming from a very reputable source. 99% of the time I'm asking who they bought it from because I want to know where they got this, you know, who inspected it originally. And I will not, like, naturally we only pay on delivery for the most part, you know, in most deals.
Yeah.
Like I will have that thing thoroughly inspected over and over again. I'll send pictures to, like, I'm very lucky. I have a relationship now with Eric Koo, who's a very famous vintage watch dealer. He does Loop This, which is a pretty famous site in the watch. Eric Koo's pretty well known. He had like a really nice episode of Talking Watches and Hodinkee, and he can kind of spot the bad things for the most part on the onset. And then the rest, you know, my watchmakers or outside watchmakers will take a look at it and let me know what's wrong with it or not.
What about the Richard Milles? Because you'll find a lot of them have been changed into ceramic cases, very high-end aftermarket ceramic cases, and to boost up the price. I mean, I don't know if you know. Well, you will know, but there's in China and Far East, they're making.
Oh, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Like what their capabilities are. It's actually, you know, you can actually find some what's it called? Some like essentially inauthentic sellers of Patek Philippe watches, right? And they perfected it to the point where the only real difference you could tell is the fact that the balance is not free sprung, and the finishing of the movement obviously isn't as high quality. But otherwise, the dial, case, strap, buckle, you can never tell the difference.
But it's more of the AP gold bracelets and cases that they're faking extremely.
Yeah, they're faking those a lot too. You have to be very careful. But for the most part, honestly, I really don't generally buy, and this is something that I am like very adamant on. I don't buy AP, Patek, and Rolex and Richard Mille without papers. Almost never. Because it just opens up, you know, it just opens up Pandora's box. What are you getting? First of all, is it all authentic? You know, is it stolen or not? And it's just like, yeah, I don't even touch it, honestly, Alex. I really just say, hey, listen, unless you can get archive paperwork directly from AP or, you know, or Patek or Rolex or somebody like that, or you can get a service card, service paperwork, then great. I'll consider it and I'll make you a legitimate offer. Otherwise, if it's just a naked watch, forget it. I'm not interested.
Now that you mentioned papers, Marco, what do you think of written papers rather than stamp papers for vintage watches?
You know, I like this is a new watch for myself. I'm not going to reveal what it is, but I like these kind of cards just because, I don't know. It's sleeker. You know, it's not so delicate, right? You get the stamp papers, you throw it out somewhere, or get shuffled within the actual paper. This is just kind of easier to you know, you just put in a safety deposit box and that's it. So yeah, I like these kind of style of warranty cards.
But there's more of the older stuff, like, you know, you get like, I'll give you an idea. I've got a vintage Daytona black dial with the red, with Daytona in the red dial Daytona, like box papers, 1980s. Yeah. Now dealers have seen it, and their comment is that the papers are not really how can I say, even though it's original papers and I know exactly where it was bought from, they're not liking it because they're not stamped, they're just written.
Mm.
What's your thoughts
So
on that?
I think that's actually like a very bad point, or it's a moot point, because to be honest with you, and listen, I've seen it, 47th Street has a certain reputation, right? Like the New York 47th Street, they can make you fake warranty card, fake papers,
Yeah.
fake stamp papers. They can even Tiffany stamp your watch, and you can almost not even tell the difference unless it's highly magnified, and you tell between the difference of the ink, on the actual dial versus the ink of the Tiffany's. Like they've perfected their. So it's kind of a moot point, right? Like the idea is everything is kind of fakeable. So to just say like, oh well, you can't really verify. You can't. You know what I mean? You really can verify it. You could take it to a Rolex AD. You could take it to kind of experts. Again, I'm not a big vintage guy just because it's not a world I'm very familiar with. That's why I tend to avoid it. And I will generally, just not tend. I just stick to modern stuff. That's really my forte and what's easier for me. And I just don't really like straying away from it.
Yeah, look, like I said, I've been burnt in the past with vintage watches. I still buy vintage watches, but you have to be really, really careful because you could have 2 or 3 experts and they don't agree.
Right. It's a huge problem, right? It is a huge problem. Very difficult.
Yeah. So now I going back to the watch that I would have if money wasn't an issue is I've mentioned it many times, but you probably know it. It's the Blackjack by Christopher Claret. Do you know that watch?
Yeah, sure.
I actually seen that watch, as in like I know I'm saying like it's a big thing, but years ago we had something called Salon QP in London, and I think the very first one I went to, and the 2 watches that stood out for me. This was over 10 years ago, easily. It must be 12, 13 years ago, and the watch that stood out for me was the Christopher Claret Blackjack because of how it's all mechanical. There's no, and you can literally pull a lever and you play blackjack with it. But it was also Lang & Son. Lang & Son was the first time I've actually ever seen one, and it was an amazing experience because I actually seen what watchmaking's about. It was bittersweet. Sweet that I seen it, but bitter because no one will understand or appreciate watchmaking until they see the likes of a Lang & Son watch. Lang & Son, should I say, Lang & Son. And when you actually look at the movement and look at the finish of the dial, hands, the movement, you can't compare it to a Rolex.
No.
Rolex it's on a different level, but Rolex is like the brand that everyone knows, a bit like Ferrari or Mercedes of cars, that everyone knows.
It's also they operate in 2 different worlds, right? I think you can't strictly compare them because they have different roles and they're operating in different segments, right? Rolex has really perfected, I would say, the utilitarian sports watch. Alonga, I think, is far more artistic. You're comparing like for lack of a better expression, like in the art world, like a print versus like a physical painting that was done by an artist. You know what I mean? Like that's the idea, right? Rolex has kind of perfected the sports watch craft. That's why they never really ventured into the fine Swiss dress watch. Whereas, Longa, Patek, all that kind of stuff, or all those kind of brands, they're on a totally different playing field, operating in although still within the watch world in a different plane entirely,
Well, Stephen said the artificial degradation of dials to look vintage is a big business these days. It's hardly any wonder that people, even experts, get burned on vintage. It's extremely difficult to tell.
Even like the Zenith Daytonas with the cooked Patrizi dials, that's a huge problem. I mean, there's so many examples. Absolutely, yeah. There's so many examples you can.
Cooked Patrizi dials. What do you mean cooked?
Yeah. So they essentially create a Patrizi dial. So essentially you have a 16520, which is a Zenith Daytona, right? So the black dial specifically in a specific time, I forget the serial or the year that it started happening, but the lacquer of the dial would seep into the subdials, the white subdials, causing them to turn brown. So that's what's known as a Patrese dial. And essentially, it's become very collectible depending on how brown the subdials are looking, or like, what's the pattern. People will actually pay a premium for that, right? It's like one of those little Rolex nuances that people enjoy. And there's a ton of those fakes out there, right? So like they'll like cook a Patrese dial, as in like cook as in like, make up a Patrese dial, and it's totally a fake Patrese, and sell it for buku money, a lot of money actually.
Wow, I didn't know that. It's
Oh
funny.
yeah, there's so many examples. Like you see like fake spider dials on Submariners and things like that, and GMTs, and it's a huge business nowadays. Huge business. Fake, also, what's big too is fake, like when a dial fades to brown, it turns tropical.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who are doing this and essentially fake turning a dial into like a fake tropical, because the tropical will be, it will just be more valuable.
I get anxiety when you mention Submariner dials. I'll tell you why. I don't know if you know this story, but many years ago, I had a client of mine that came in with a solid gold bluesy, like pre-ceramic.
Mm-hmm.
He said to me, "Can you service this watch? And in the meantime, I want to sell it for 13." This was years ago, 13,000. Yeah, I didn't have 13,000 at the time, but he says, "Can you service it for me?" So I'm servicing it, yeah. And basically, as I'm servicing it, I noticed the dial is thicker than usual. It's a lot thicker, and it's got like gold speckles on the dial. And I thought, well, this dial is an original. Took the dial off, but it just looked too much of a good quality dial. Anyway, I couldn't figure out what was going on. And he didn't have any box and papers to it. So I was on the island of Malta just to visit some friends, and one of my friends says to me, "Can you get a lapis lazuli dial for a day?" And then it clicked. That it was an original lapis lazuli Submariner dial, which is extremely rare.
Super rare.
And he didn't. So when I
those are like, those watches are like 50,000 minimum today, because if you can even find one like a lapis dial, I think they only made for like 1 or 2 years, right? It was a super short production run, super short.
Yeah, I know, it kills me.
Oh, that's unbelievable.
Yeah, I will never see one of those watches again in my life.
Probably not. No, they never turn up for sale. Almost never. You never.
No. So I did the right thing and said to the client, "Look, this watch is worth a lot more than you think." And he was so happy that I told him. And I said, "Look, I don't have a buy for it. I don't have a buy for this particular piece, but I do know someone that will that will just sell it for you." He says, "No problem. When it sells, I'll give you a percentage." He disappeared. He sold it and disappeared.
It happens.
No, it does always happen to me more than once. But yeah, I see them on Chrono 24 for like 80,000 sterling.
Oh yeah. It's unbelievably rare.
Now, I don't know. I'm sure. I mean, someone told me this. Who's a Rolex expert told me that they actually, for that dial to fit in the case, because it's thicker, they cut into the case. So
yes, as far as I know, they did, and they did this for most stone dials. It's why they'll have a smaller rehob for the most part, because the dial's a little bit thicker, just because of the material, right? They have to put more material on there, to avoid it cracking so easily, right? It's not like a lacquer. Lacquer for the most part is easier.
Now, there is quite a few fake stone dials, isn't there?
Oh yeah, ton. You can get aftermarket stone dials, no problem. It's not that difficult to get at all.
But I still haven't seen a dial that is that convincing to be real on day dates.
No. They can't really replicate it as well. No doubt about it.
They can't replicate the Tahitian dials or the meteorites. They do, but they just look shit. They look terrible.
Yeah, you could see it's not at all, especially meteorite. Like the one thing about Rolex meteorite dials is they're just kind of for lack of a better term, cut above the rest. They really are. The way that they treat it, they treat it in some special way that is just totally different than anybody else.
It's the Tahitian dial. I don't know how they get it. It's so nice.
Sorry about that.
No, it's all right. It's the Tahitian. They just, I mean, mother of pearl, fake Rolex mother of pearl dials always look fake.
Yeah, it's also
They just
like
cannot.
again, the standards are very, very high for Rolex. Probably, and I don't know this for certain, but probably they throw out what would you say? Probably at least 75% of the Tahitian dials that they produce, right? Because they actually put it in a clamshell, put it submerge it in water, and then take it up when the mother of pearl sets in. For the most part, right? It's like a natural mother of pearl. So like, how many of those dials are actually physically usable when you pull them out of the water? I'd wager it can't be that many, right? It's got to be like maybe 1 in 10 or even potentially less than that dials that they can physically use.
Have you had any APH dial Daytonas in recently?
No, not recently. Not recently.
No, because I had a client of mine that wanted an insurance valuation. And it's 2015 white dial Daytona, and he didn't realize that it was an APH dial. And the person that sold it to him didn't realize it wasn't written. So he wanted full insurance documentation. So it obviously ups the price.
Sure.
But Rolex is probably the only company I know in the world that makes mistakes, and that particular mistake is worth money. I don't know any other company that gets away with that.
Yeah, it's interesting.
No.
I don't know anybody else either.
No, I mean, they make mistakes. I mean, I don't know if you saw that Explorer where it had like, is it 3 6s or 3 9s?
No, I don't. Yeah, like the two nines or 2 3s. Yeah, that's funny. You don't tend to see those error dials a lot, to be honest, right? I think that's what makes it kind of cool. When an error dial comes up, it's like kind of, it ends up being a little bit more valuable because a lot of these brands have pretty strict quality control measures, right? So for something to come out that's not correct, it's actually not normal, right?
I think Steve is trying to say that Tudor was a mistake. Do you like Tudor?
Yeah, Tudor makes a good product. I think they deliver some really good quality for the money, right? I think you can get a lot of pre-owned Tudor watches for a great value.
Yeah. Marco, I think it's time for us to end the stream, but I appreciate your time, and I appreciate everybody watching. So I hope everyone has a good night, and I'm sure we'll do this again.
Absolutely, Alex. Thank you so much for having me on. It's nice to see everybody and a lot of people I recognize in the chat. But yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on.
Take care, guys.